I've been observing wolves in the wild for more than a decade now, and I've been fortunate to have a number of remarkable encounters with these controversial animals. In the western United States, wolves and their reintroduction are a volatile topic, to say the least, as evidenced by a shocking incident in Wyoming, which has resulted in worldwide outrage and cast renewed and disturbing light on the story of wolves and how we as humans are or are not adapting to their renewed presence on the landscape. It was on Leap Day, 2024, when a man who I'll refer to as Mr. Roberts located a young wolf while riding his snowmobile near Daniel, Wyoming. It's Mr. Roberts' actions following that initial encounter that have ignited a firestorm with potentially far-reaching consequences for humans and wolves alike. According to news reports and documents filed by Wyoming Game and Fish, after encountering the wolf, Roberts chased the animal down with his snowmobile, ran over it, quote, injuring it so bad, according to a Wyoming state employee familiar with the case, that the wolf, quote, could barely stay conscious. Roberts then bound it in duct tape and outfitted the animal with a shock collar and leash before parading it around a local bar, where Mr. Roberts and his associates spent hours posing for pictures, even jokingly kissing and hugging the animal, before Roberts reportedly took it behind the bar and shot it. One witness present that night at the bar has described Mr. Roberts during the disturbing episode as, quote, drunk, thinking the situation was hilarious, and repeatedly drawing attention to his prize, ignoring the bar owner's directions in the process to remove the wolf from the establishment. The incident, once public, was quickly and understandably met with international anger and indignation, and demands that Roberts face accountability for his cruel actions. But the uproar has only intensified in response to the $250 fine issued to Roberts by Wyoming Game and Fish for, quote, the unlawful possession of a warm-blooded animal. So why the minuscule fine? Well, following the most recent delisting of wolves as a protected species in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, wolf management has been mostly turned over to state wildlife managers. Wolves are still federally protected within Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks, but outside the parks, they enter the first of Wyoming's management zones, known as the, quote, trophy game management area, where wolf numbers are managed like other game populations. South of Jackson, Wyoming, there's also a seasonal management zone. But 85% of Wyoming, including Daniel, Wyoming, where Roberts injured, captured, tormented, and killed the wolf at the heart of this controversy, is part of what's known as the Predator Management Zone, where wolves have no protections and where animal cruelty laws do not apply to the harvest of wild animals. Now, a local sheriff's department has opened a case to explore whether animal cruelty charges can be brought under civil statutes. But to date, the $250 fine imposed on Roberts by Wyoming Fish and Game is the only legal punishment he has faced for his torturous treatment of this poor animal. The ugly episode is now added to a long catalog of controversies and cultural bitterness which continue to define the debate over wolves and their proper management. While attempting to paint Roberts as a, quote, decent, hardworking family man, a friend of his recently wrote a letter to the editor of Cowboy State Daily, sharing an undeniably tragic story where Roberts is said to have saved his wife following a serious accident, also involving a snowmobile. But only 2 paragraphs of the letter are dedicated to defending Roberts. The remaining 12 paragraphs briefly concede that Roberts showed, quote, poor judgment in his treatment of the young wolf, before angrily devolving into a list of arguments and grievances common among detractors of wolf reintroduction and or supporters of both historic and modern predator eradication programs, targeting among others wolves and grizzly bears. The letter then finally culminates with an overtly bigoted comment primarily blaming the listed grievances on people living in California and New York. Now, despite that advice, I do feel it's important to give ear to this individual's claims. But I also feel that it's important to stress that evidence suggests that attitudes regarding wolf reintroduction are complex, evolving, and not neatly defined by state boundaries or political affiliation, including in states like Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana. That said, there seems to be a mostly shared sense of horror and indignation towards Robert's torturous treatment of this animal. Now, I'm not sharing Mr. Roberts' full name or face in this video for two reasons. First, compared with the internet, I believe law enforcement and the justice system are far better suited to dealing with Mr. Roberts individually. And second, Mr. Roberts' behavior should not be construed as representative of all people living in states or communities most directly affected by wolf reintroduction. And that includes the community of Daniel, Wyoming, and those present in the bar that night. That said, the actions of Mr. Roberts have likely exposed some disturbing gaps in both wildlife management policy and popular attitudes towards wolves and other wild animals. The very same witness who described the scene at the bar that night has also reported that following the backlash and subsequent fine, Roberts has reportedly been telling people around town, quote, "It was worth it." This raises the very real concern that without lawful provisions against cruelty, the episode in Daniel, Wyoming could easily be repeated both in public and in private without a lawful means to punish the sadistic treatment of wolves and other animals. And then there's also the list of grievances shared by Robert's friend, which includes the popular claim that wolves are responsible for the destruction of the state's moose population, the popular assertion that wolves kill for sport, that predator recovery programs have made the area unsafe, and that historically, the practice of killing off wolves and grizzlies was, quote, "a good thing." While there are obvious flaws in the author's messaging, it's nonetheless important to consider how public policies like wolf reintroduction are affecting those nearest to predator restoration areas. And given the internet's penchant for adolescent insults and even death threats, it's not at all difficult for me to believe, as claimed, that some individuals have expressed their outrage towards Mr. Roberts' reprehensible behavior in inappropriate and similarly reprehensible ways. That's one of the primary reasons that I've chosen to omit the full identities of participating or affected parties in this video. Speaking for myself, I am deeply troubled by Mr. Roberts' behavior. Whether wolf, deer, dog, bear, cat, bird, or sheep, treating any animal as Mr. Roberts has is completely contemptible and demonstrates something far, far worse than poor judgment. But there is also a real risk that Mr. Roberts and his vile behavior will become a distraction. Strange as it may seem, this episode of wanton cruelty, while absolutely worthy of outrage, is little more than a symptom of a much broader issue. The true subject at hand is the informed and ethical management of wildlife generally, and wolves specifically. While state and federal wildlife policies are very much informed by biologists who spend their time in the field studying and monitoring wildlife populations, the simple reality is you can never remove politics from wildlife or public land management. It's just not possible. People are the primary drivers of public policy. And there are a lot of people who believe wolves belong on the landscape. But as demonstrated by the letter written in defense of Mr. Roberts, there are also a lot of people who vigorously disagree. Those of you who have been following At Home in Wild Spaces for a while know that I actively avoid participating in culture wars. Rather than following the crowd, a social clique, or a mob, I'm a firm believer in following the fundamentals. With close to 30 years of data since wolves were reintroduced, I assure you there is absolutely no need to get pulled into yet another aimless, petulant, and pointless culture clash. 4 years ago, I wrote an exhaustive 4-part series of articles thoroughly examining every controversy related to wolf reintroduction, including every single issue raised by the friend of Mr. Roberts. I covered the effect of wolves on ranchers, wildlife, the environment. I addressed the claim that the quote, wrong wolf was introduced, whether wolves pose a significant threat to human safety, and much more. Now, this is admittedly a nuanced conversation with significant ramifications for people and wildlife alike, which is why in the coming months I'll be releasing a number of videos separating wolf fact from wolf fiction. So make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on this one-of-a-kind video series. And of course, if you don't want to wait for the videos, I've linked each article below in the description and invite you to read them yourself. I'm not here to tell you how to think. My philosophy is simple. Access to the best information allows people to make the very best choices. Which is why I wrote my Fact versus Fiction series on wolf reintroduction in the first place, and why I will continue to make the absolute best outdoor resources found anywhere. And I encourage you to stay tuned and add your voice to the conversation. Share your thoughts and your questions in the comments below, and most importantly, voice your concerns to state and federal wildlife managers and your elected leaders. Our wild spaces need you. They need your informed and measured voice to effect change when necessary. So until next time, this is Mike reminding you that the story of wild spaces is the story of people, and you have a part to play in that story.